Tank Duel, Enemy in the Crosshairs is a new war game by GMT. It depicts tank combat in World War II. We had two sides, the Germans and the Soviets, and yes, we have tanks. There are also optional rules for infantry, but the protagonists here are the tanks. The game reminds me a little bit of B-17 Queen of the Skies, that classic war game, because it has a strange and appealing to me combination of tactical details, and also abstract elements. Almost like it glosses over things that you don't necessarily need about the big picture, and then it goes quite into the detail, and it shows you, well, the position of each crew member on your vehicle, for example. The game doesn't have a map. Again, there's an abstract element here. Simply, each tank is represented by one of these boards. They're double-sided, so a lot of variety there. And the game is designed to depict confrontations between at least 4 tanks, 2 per side. And simply will have these tanks in front of you, and they never move. There is a way in which you will abstractly represent the relative position of the tanks. Initially I wanted to film this video and show you the action on 2 tanks, and then I was constantly moving the camera back and forth. I got seasick. So what we're gonna do, imagine that there are 2 tanks exactly like this one. And I know the Soviets stole a tank, is exactly like this one, and now we have to fight against it. And so we can stay on this board as I explain the game to you, or let's say give you the general gist of the game, because when it gets to all the details, it can be pretty complex. It has a core of very simple ideas, and then, especially when it comes to resolving combat and taking into account all possible variables, a lot of stuff may happen. This is also a card-driven game, entirely card-driven, no dice. It revolves around this deck of cards entirely. Now, a closer look at your tank board. Here we have a track that indicates your move level and fire level. There's a starting value, and then different factors may move your level up or down. When you play a fire or move card, there will be a number next to it. You can play that card and execute that action only if your fire level is equal to or higher than the level indicated there. So fire 8 can only be used if you have indeed 8 or higher, which means that if your fire level and move level go down, then you have fewer options for actions. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, but it's tougher. Next, we have a holding box here where we place terrain cards. So if we are moving into a terrain, then we place a card there that indicates pretty much that terrain. And I love the attention to detail. I love that it shows us what we are seeing from the tank. And so we move there, we place the card there, and there are also indications about cover, hold down, and possibly possible other effects. Next, other things, the small number here, oh no, before we go to the cards, more about the tanks. Here we have victory points that will be based on scenario-specific conditions, but mainly on destroying stuff, blowing stuff up, and killing people. That's just the way it is. Equipment that we start with, people in our crew, and they may die during the action. In this case, then there will be limitations, and you can then start moving people around, scrambling to cover the positions that have been left empty. Although they'll never be optimally covered, there will be penalties if, for example, the gunner has been killed and somebody else is replacing the gunner. It's not just quite the same. Then we have this track here, which is super important, which is how the game abstracts space and relative position. Imagine this. The battlefield is divided into 2 areas, and the central line, the Germans are coming from one side, the Soviets on the other. The central line is at position 0, 0, 0. And these are the boxes indicate the distance of the tank from the central line. So if we are here, we start at 600 meters, and then we spend an action and move at 400. Also, we get in a range where we'll get more cards because the action is more intense there. That's simply how we know that now we're moving closer. closer still, then we move back. If we're here and we move further, that is, we go past the central line, we flip this marker this way, and then we move this way to indicate how deep into enemy territory we are moving. And so that allows you to calculate the relative distance between different tanks. If this tank is here at 400 and an enemy tank is at 402 on the other side, then they are 800 meters of distance. So that's pretty neat. When you move, you will get spotted, so other people will place markers pointing to your tank, indicating your tank, and they will place it in this box here where you place the markers of all of the tanks that you have spotted. You can also during the game decide to acquire a target, in which case you must not be moving. You must also just pay attention to only that target, so if you're acquiring a spotted target, then you remove all of the other markers. And here we have a table used to resolve combat. It's a little laborious, but it has a lot of historical flavor, so there is that element there. Now, the heart of the game revolves around this deck of cards. This is a card-driven game. You start with a hand of 4 cards per tank that you have, plus or minus possible modifiers based on, say, the position in which you are and a lot of other factors. So you have your hand of cards. And I'll just say you. Who is you? Well, you should be you, the player, you watching. But who are the other people? You can play the game against other human beings. You can play against the AI. There is an AI that controls the actions of an automated enemy. Or also you can play Solitaire the way I did, which is old school. I simply play controlling all tanks by myself, best of my capabilities, and there is enough randomness here that I was perfectly able to do so. Now, you will have your hand of cards. The first thing that you do once you have your hand of cards is you bid for initiative. Each tank will receive a card that will be placed face down in the initiative box, and then we will all reveal them at the same time, and we will look at this number here. These cards have a lot of information, and we'll look at this number here that tells us the initiative value. So the deck has 100 cards numbered from 1 to 100, which means that there will not be ties there, and then we will activate the tanks in ascending order from lowest numbers to highest number. And suppose I want to go a little early, then I put a 39 there, maybe. In any case, when it is your turn to activate a tank, you discard the initiative card, so we know the tank activated. We can see at a glance which tanks haven't activated yet, and now it's time to do stuff. You there will be some administrative things that you have to do if, for example, your tank is on fire or things like that, if you have to take a morale check. But when it gets to the main heart of the game, your tank will take an action, a main action, plus any number of what they're called field actions. Let's call them secondary actions. A main action, for example, will be to move or to fire. You can play a card or 2 or 3 to execute a certain action, a main action, and the first card that you play indicates what you do. The first one is a move, you're moving, you're moving, you're moving. And then you can play other cards to add benefits to it, to modify the first card, but the first card determines what you do. And suppose that I only want to play this one, move 4, I can move because it's below my movement level, and so I can do that. And when I move, I get spotted, so other people will get a marker to indicate that they saw me, and then you simply resolve that, again moving on that area there. These cards also information here. For example, you may have noticed a line of icons here that are used to resolve certain things. If, for example, something catches on fire, things explode, if you're able to spot concealed enemies, things like that. You can, for those quote-unquote field actions, you can play command cards, which are sort of special action cards. You do what they say. You can play terrain cards on enemy tanks to alter their situation. You can discard battle cards to stop moving. So there are just many different things. But I know you because I know me, and I want to know about combat. Alright. To start a combat action, you need to fire. Maybe actually, that's important concept is flank. You can play flank cards to remove a flank on your tank. This can be a defensive action. Somebody is flanking you. Or, if you're in motion, then you may flank a spotted enemy. So you play to place a flank marker on the tank to indicate that you have that advantage. But now, hooray, we are firing. Firing takes a couple of steps. Basically, it works on the idea that in tank combat you have at least 2 steps. One, to see if your hit makes contact with the enemy, and then if it does anything, if it penetrates or not. So first you need to see if you're hitting at all. Now, we'll look when we are firing at the ordnance table on the tank that we're using, and that will tell us the number to hit for each distance. Suppose we are firing at an enemy which is at 800 meters, and then the number to hit is 82. If we are doing at 1400, then it is 51, and so on and so forth. Then we modify that. We modify that based on, say, right here, the card that you used to fire may modify things, and then there may be other things, say, for example, if I acquire the target, and a lot of other modifiers for size of the target, if the target is flanked, and so on and so forth. So finally, we get the exact number to hit. At that point, we draw a card, again, from our always reliable multi-purpose deck, and we look at the battle number here. If the battle number is equal to or lower than our modified number to hit, we scored a hit. If it's 96 to 100 is always a miss, no matter how good you are, because there should always be that stuff. Now, suppose that our number to hit was 50 after all is said and done, and we played 30, so hooray, now we scored a hit. Now we need to see where we hit. If you play 2 fire cards to trigger the action, you get to choose the part of the tank that you hit. Otherwise, you will need to draw a battle card, again from our trusty deck, to determine that. You pull the card and you look at this number here, now this time the one under the cross here, and you cross-reference that with the hit location table, which is at the bottom of each tank. And say, for example, here if we drew a 7, then we know that we hit the turret of the opponent. Okay, we have that. Now, that tells us also the armor value of that part of the tank, which will be different depending on whether we are firing, we are attacking the front or we are flanking the enemy. So now there we have the armor value, the one that we need to penetrate. We'll look at the penetration number for our tank. We'll look at the penetration modifier on a card, and the color here, if it's if it's black or if it's red, matters, because in case we do damage, then red means heavy damage, this one means light damage. So basically, if at the end we penetrate after comparing the armor value and the penetration value, that is to say, if our total penetration value modified is equal to or higher than the defensive value, the armor value of the opponent, then we finally know that we damage the opponent. And now it's time for them to pull a card, to pull a damage card. Yes, there's more than one deck here. Now, we had to check as a possibility it's a critical hit, in which case we resolve the critical hit box. Otherwise, we'll look at the box for the part of the tank that we hit. we look at the entry for light damage or heavy damage, and we simply apply that. Then we take a morale check. Using the same card, we look at this other column here, going from top to bottom. So first seeing, for example, which applies. If, for example, our crew is green, we use this one. With more experienced troops, we go down here, we use this one. If we are on fire, and so on and so forth. There is a check mark, good for us, we pass the morale check. There is a cross, meh, then that was failed. The crew breaks. One break is bad because it's scary. Two breaks, then the troop bails out. And I need to tell you, of course, that is not good for their reputation and the overall tactical situation of your group. A lot of things may happen, but I don't want to get into details with those because, again, I'll let you be delighted with reading all of those from the rulebook. There's a lot of other stuff, what you do when stuff explodes, fire, a lot of other things. But the general ideas are these. Yes, the procedure for resolving combat is a little convoluted, but ultimately, in most cases, is move, try to flank, try to find protection. Of course, those modifiers, they will be applied to number 2 hit scores against you. Play intuitively. Try to look for a good position, close enough, but not suicidally so. Attack the opponent and hope that you score a hit. And that's pretty much how you play Tank Duel. You continue like this, turn after turn, for a number of times until the deck is exhausted. Or I should say, actually, you shuffle in the bottom half of the deck the shuffle card. When you encounter it, well, you reshuffle the deck for a certain number of times, depending on number of players. When you have done the final reshuffle, then you place the game end card again somewhere randomly shuffle in the bottom half of the deck. Continue until the game end card is revealed, and at that point you count victory points and you determine the winner. So, Tank Duel, the game really reminds me of B17 Queen of the Skies, which is a major compliment by you because I love the game and I think there are reasons why it is a classic. It reminds me of that game, not so much for the procedures, which are pretty different actually, but for the flow and the feel, because it's one of these tactical games where you do get to see the white of the eyes of the people, not necessarily the enemy, but your own men that are there and fighting and dying, and you see people scrambling within the tank as bad stuff happens from all directions. You really get the sense of, well, the human toll that warfare takes, which is something important. We love war games, but we do not necessarily love war, and it's important that we are reminded there is that toll, there is that element. So, that element to me is very fascinating. Another element that it has in common with the B17, of course, is a rather considerable amount of luck. I don't know if there is more or less here. I think that here you have a lot more decisions because the cards can be used in different ways. You can combine them differently. Oh, this card is useless, at least I'll use it for initiative. Or it's awesome, I wish I could use it for what it says, but I need it for initiative. I can use this one as a modifier for something else, and so on and so forth. It's fun to create these combos. It's fun to see again what you can do and chain cards. But at the same time, sometimes you do wonder if Lady Luck is there smiling at us paternalistically, finding us cute because of all of our attempts to control our destiny, and ultimately that perfectly shot that you shot hits and bounces back or misses spectacularly, and then somebody out of the blue comes and shoots you and your tank blows up, because that is what could happen. Again, if you play war games, you probably are aware of this. We don't play chess, we try to play something that reminds us of the real thing, that gives us an appreciation of the dynamics of the real thing, and war is a realm of uncertainty. So if you really want a game in which you can maximize your performance and play, say, meritocratically, again, there is chess, there are other randomless games out there. But this feels right precisely because of that frustration, that anguish that you will have when you keep missing and the opponent just causes massive damage to you. That is something that really fits with the theme. And you can find consolation in the fact, well, my gameplay was really good. I did all I could within the realm of uncertainty in the game depicts. So there is that element about the feel and the flavor of the game. To me, that's okay also because this kind of game, like P17, to me, it's a game about the narrative rather than about the modifiers, rather than about all those things. Then I'm still trying to achieve, I'm still trying to find the right terrain where to wait and ambush an opponent. I'm still trying to figure out the right distance. I'm still trying to maximize my chances, but I'm okay with those plans not working the way I expected them when that is made up for by a very strong sense of narrative, almost cinematic feel of the events represented in the game. The procedures are very easy on one hand, but then there are just so many specific individual cases that this is not a game that I would recommend for beginners, although technically as I play these cards and quote-unquote do what they say, but they say a lot of stuff and you have to remember a lot of different passages. I like on one hand the combat system because it really gives me that sense of the detailed sense of tank warfare. I probably could do with like one passage less than we have here. It is a fairly elaborated system, although in many cases that won't be a problem because you only do one check to see if you hit and you don't. Then when you hit, then you go through those other extra steps, which also actually had the advantage of creating a sense of suspense. I hit, but did I do anything? So the tension mounts, and when you finally succeed to do anything, then is very rewarding. There's a big payoff. I cannot comment on how gameplay with multiple players would work because I only played solitaire, but I liked it in that format, in my traditional multiplayer solo. I enjoyed it because of the narrative, because of the decisions, yes, because of the surprises. And the randomness, I may have mixed feelings about it, but let's say there are moments in which I'm really mad about the randomness, but without it, it wouldn't be a war game, and so there is that element. The production is also very good. The rulebook does, I think, a good job in explaining a game that is not all that simple, ultimately, again, because of the amount of information that you have to digest. But ultimately, Tank Duel, Enemy in the Crosshair is a really good game. It's really strong, especially if you enjoy narratives in wargaming, then this is a game that really does that very well.